Good evening, everybody. Can I welcome you to this virtual special traffic and road safety advisory panel meeting. Present are members and advisors of the panel and council officers. Also present are invited members of the public who will be addressing us this evening. Other councillors are also present. Can I refer members and officers to the published protocols for holding virtual meetings? Please note the following. Members of the panel should ensure that they have their videos on at all times, but put microphones on mute unless speaking. Other members, advisors and officers should switch off their videos and put their microphones on mute until they are invited to speak. In case of a technical problem, the meeting will adjourn until the issue is resolved. If the technical problem persists and the meeting is incorrect, the meeting will be abandoned and rearranged for a later date. The meeting is being audio and video recorded and will be available to watch or listen to on the website. Would members of the panel, including advisors, raise their hands from the function bar to indicate that they wish to speak? Please switch off your mobile phones or put them on a silent mode. We have a large agenda before us this evening, and it is my intention that the meeting will finish at 9:30 p.m. I hope. Right, great. Okay, so if I can move on to the agenda itself, are there any reserved members at all? No. All right, we've got the A team here tonight then. I have apologies from Jeremy Leach, who is the Living Streets advisor. Unfortunately, he's got another meeting tonight, so he won't be here. Declarations of interest. I hope that members have contacted Democratic Services about that, but are there any other declarations of interest, John?
Yes, Chair. Thank you, and sorry for not declaring a non-pecuniary interest as a Hatch End Ward councillor, because I believe some items in Hatch End might come up.
Okay, all right, thanks, John. Paul.
Thank you. So I'm not on the committee, so I don't get the paper. I'm a resident in the West Harrow LTN. It's a non-pecuniary interest from the periphery of it, but just for record. Yeah.
Lucky old you. Right. Okay. Right. Thanks. Are there any other declarations of interest at all? No. Right. Okay. The minutes of the last meeting that was held on the 2nd March. Again, I hope that members have indicated they agree with it. Can we agree the minutes for that meeting? Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Agreed.
Right. Thank you. Well, we're on now to item 4, which is public questions. Now, we have received 14 public questions. I will ensure all 14 questions are heard. This will obviously take longer than 15 minutes normally allocated, but I feel it is important for everybody to ask their questions. As with the last special task that we had in January, any supplementary questions will receive a written reply. Okay. Paul.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make a point, and whilst it's obviously for the committee to decide if they want to take anonymous questions or not, I think there's 2 things I'd like to say. Firstly, I think it would be helpful when the papers are published, because these are not genuinely anonymous questions. The council actually does have the name and address of the people submitting the question. So just presentationally, I think it would be helpful if it said name withheld rather than anonymous, just so that people can be clear that the constitution has been followed. I also think I'm just slightly wary, whilst we're not going to object to this particular thing, because I think it's important that as many people have their say as possible, as a general principle, except if there are real safety issues, I'm uncomfortable with anonymous questions. just because an issue which is divisive or controversial, which this certainly is, that in and of itself shouldn't be a reason for people to be able to do these things anonymously. We have all sorts of controversial issues that come up, and if we have people on both sides submitting anonymous questions, I'm not sure that particularly helps. But that's, I think, where we leave it. But just to put on record, and maybe Democratic Services can look at the policy for anonymous questions. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Paul. I mean, we do have the contact details of those people concerned. So if the panel is agreeable, I would like to proceed now with the public questions, including those anonymous questions. Okay, right. So can we now move to question 1, which is Ian Price, please?
Good evening, everybody.
Hello, Ian.
Hi. Yeah, so my question as submitted was at the 2nd of March meeting. I think it was by Councillor Patel. It was suggested that a representative of motorists or businesses should be present at future meetings, and I wanted to know if there was an update on that suggestion and how that was being taken forward.
Okay, thanks very much, Ian. A number of different suggestions for representatives are currently under consideration, and no decision has been made yet. This is still being reviewed, and the panel will be advised of any new representatives in due course. Right, do you have a supplementary question at all, Ian?
I do have a supplementary question. There's an A and a B part to this. So the A part is, since the council's been shown by the consultation on LTNs and cycle schemes to be so disastrously out of touch with residents, it is that the residents that it's meant to serve. Will Varsha Palmer now resign as portfolio holder? That's the A part. The B part is, far from being anonymous, I would like to disclose that I'm the Reform UK candidate at the forthcoming May the 6th elections.
Oh, well, I wish you the best of luck there. Anyway, okay. But as I said at the beginning, that question will get a written reply, will be supplied to you. Okay, right. Thanks very much, Ian. Right, thank you. All right, the second question is from a resident of LTN 02. It's it's not that long, but I shall read the question and the reply. Right. The consultations on LTNs involved misinformation along Project Fear, in inverted commas, Project Fear lines, illegal fly posting, online abuse, verbal threats in the street. All have been reported and documented. The question is posted anonymously on the victim's behalf due to fear of further action. The council failed to promote its proposal and to actively counter the misinformation with factual responses. Leaflets were produced and distributed, funded by the anti-LTN group, and fly posted. Examples provided with this question, so statements that residents would be charged for permits, excessive levels of funding needed, council tax increased, and presenting unfeasible alternatives such as speed cameras which have no funding. The low turnout in the neighbourhoods was due to residents not wanting to get involved in a heated atmosphere of misinformation and abuse. Do councillors believe the consultation was fair and accurately represents the views of the residents and presents the views of the residents of the neighbours, I think they'd be, and the neighbours? If not, an investigation and a way forward proposal needs bringing back to this committee. Right, the answer is as follows. The council believes that the engagement and consultation carried out by the council was done so fairly. The council provided a balanced and factual source of information about the schemes, writing directly to residents living in and nearby with detailed proposal. Overall, a consistently negative sentiment towards the schemes can be seen through all the public engagements that have been undertaken, and so it is considered that this does actually reflect the majority view. The panel is aware that tensions have been higher and witnessed this firsthand at TARSAT meetings. It does not agree with or condone abuse or threats to members of the public, councillors or our staff. Right, so that was the second question. The third question was supposed to be from Glenys Chiswell, but I understand she's not present this evening. So you're stuck with me again, I'm afraid. So I shall read the question and the answer. Right, the question is, assuming that the council votes to extend the trial period for the school street schemes, what system will be put in place to ensure residents directly affected by them will have fair and equal access to all the necessary services, e.g. tradespeople, deliveries, taxis, etc., and visitors during the times of operation, so that we can live normally like other Harrow residents. Many of these things cannot be scheduled, and it seems that we are being penalised for living near to a school. Right, the response is as follows. School streets, by their design, make an area directly outside of school safer and healthier for children and residents living in the area, by reducing the volume of vehicles at the beginning and end of the school day. Schools have been very supportive of the schemes during the trials, and surveys have shown that there have been significant increases in people walking to school, which helps improve public health and air quality. It is recognised that there are some compromises of living on school streets, mainly the restriction of visitors by car at set times of the day. However, these restrictions are generally only for an hour in the morning and in the afternoon on weekdays during the school term. And the existing conditions may have made it difficult for visitors to drive and park safely nearby. The remainder of the day is unrestricted, and generally it is viewed as the benefits to residents of a much improved environment with reduced congestion, pollution and distraction from parked vehicles. Most, if not all, major delivery companies offer a choice of delivery from the initial proposed delivery slot. The scheme will be fully reviewed at the end of 12 months, so we will have reliable data when the scheme is fully functional. Right. The next question is from Jerry Devine, because I'm fed up with speaking now, so I hope Jerry's here. You are here, aren't you, Jerry?
Yes, I am.
Oh, good. Thank you. Right, go on. Off you go.
My name is Jerry Devine. I'm a motorist, cyclist, and a public transport user, and a resident of Beresford Road in LTN 02. I'm also a committee member of Harrow Recreation Ground Users Association and chair of Headstone Southward Safer Neighbourhoods Police Panel, and I also am involved in a number of other voluntary groups throughout the borough. I do hold a master's degree in transportation and traffic planning, and I was principal transportation officer at Brent Council a number of years ago. My question
is
right. The restrictions introduced as part of the LTN have been significantly controversial. Indeed, even the groups who have strongly opposed the LTNs as a whole have acknowledged issues on particular roads and not opposed local interventions that do not impact through traffic. The closure of Beresford Road in LTN 02 creates little inconvenience for residents and no inconvenience for through traffic. It has been very successful in eliminating speeding on Beresford Road and Grafton roads, and so significantly increasing safety for people walking and cycling to Harrow Recreation Ground, in particular children and the elderly. As such, would the committee consider recommending that the emergency services are consulted to allow the trial closure of Beresford Road to be reinstated in full for a further 12-month trial period or made permanent?
Right, thanks very much, Sherry, for the question. Reply is a fairly brief reply, I'm afraid. I note your suggestion about retaining a closure in Beresford Road. TARSAT will consider a recommendation to work towards introducing speed reductions in roads and streets with identified road safety issues. Do you have a supplementary question at all?
Yes, I do. Excuse me. In the event of a positive response to my main question, would it be possible to retain the planters in their original location? In other words, forming a complete closure to through traffic, except bicycles. Otherwise, the road will continue to be a shortcut to speeding traffic, as it has become since the widening of the gap in February. The detour for emergency vehicles will be negligible, maximum 250 metres. And if the planters are retained, Beresford Road residents would be happy to maintain them. And a small portion of the £25,000 cost of removing the planters would be saved, as would something of Harrow's reputation as a green borough, as we would not become the first borough in London to remove its entire LTN network.
Okay, right. Thanks, Joe. As I say, you will get a written reply on your supplementary question. I'll allow our officers to get back to you fairly quickly about that one. Right, thank you very much. The next question is Karen Jolliffe. I thought, did I see, is she here? I thought I saw her earlier.
Yes, I'm here, thank you.
Oh, you are here, Karen? Oh,
yeah.
I wasn't sure if you'd be here or not. Right, your question then, please.
Yeah, when will the pedestrian crossing outside West Harrow's tube station and rear entrance to Vaughan School be reinstated, please?
Right, okay. The response is very brief. The crossing will be reinstalled when the LTN is removed. So as soon as the LTN is removed, the crossing will be reinstated. Do you have a supplementary, Karen?
Please, what date would that be, please?
Well, it depends on what the TARSAT decides tonight, and then the recommendations will go to Cabinet, which will be next Thursday. So, but if they agree that they be removed, then it'll be soon after that date. But obviously, it's up to the panel what they decide on the LTNs.
Okay, thank you, Jerry.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Right, okay, thank you. Now it's Claire Jolly. Claire.
Hello, sorry. Okay, just want to make sure that it was definitely me you meant. Okay, so my question is that I was pleased to see that the council were looking to extend the school street scheme to encourage sustainable travel for our children to and from school. However, given you're also proposing to eliminate the low traffic neighbourhoods, which provide access to some of the schools in the scheme, how do you propose to make those streets safe for the parents and children to walk or bike to those schools rather than use their cars? Some parents who don't bike or walk say that danger has been a major reason behind them not doing that in the first place. I bike my two children to school, which is more than a mile away, and it's been increasingly dicey with people ignoring the 20-mile-an-hour limit, which your own report states can't be enforced by any speed cameras. I'm also anticipating that the HGVs are going to return with a vengeance once the LTNs are removed. So I'd like to understand the strategy behind increasing the school street scheme while removing the LTNs, please.
Right, thanks very much, Claire. The reply is as follows, which is fairly brief again. I note your comments about the impact of removing LTNs where there are schools and the impact on the safety of children and parents. TARSAC will consider a recommendation to work towards introducing speed reduction in road and streets with identified road safety issues. Do you have a supplementary question at all, Claire?
Yes, I do. In terms of those speed reduction measures, what funding is going to be available for those and what timescale might it be available by, please?
Right, okay, all right. As I said previously, you will get a written reply on your supplementary question. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Right, the next question is from a resident of LTN 202. I'm afraid it's quite a long question, and although the answer is fairly short. Right, okay, well, the question is, according to Department for Transport figures, in the 11 years since the introduction of the sat-nav function in Google Maps in the UK, 3.9 billion more miles are now being driven around residential streets and other minor roads in London each year, a greater than 50% increase, and it should be noted there was no corresponding increase in overall times miles on A and B roads over the same period. It is also compared to no increase in the volumes of traffic on this category of C and unclassified roads in the entire 16-year period to this sat-nav function being introduced. This is compounded by the fact that Sustrand's research suggests that driving a mile on a minor urban road is twice as likely to kill or seriously injure a child pedestrian, and 3 times more likely to kill or seriously injure a child cyclist compared to driving a mile on an urban A road. Cut-through traffic levels and speed driven by sat-nav are now a big problem, and this traffic is far more dangerous than when carried on minor roads than main roads. I have seen correspondence between a Conservative councillor and a resident of the LTNs not acknowledging that something needs to be done about the significant, in inverted commas, issues posed by traffic on a number of these roads, but just saying that he supports alternative infrastructure intervention to LTNs. The forward to the recent consultation also promised that other measures are being considered. The Council's own report on the consultation now notes that, quoting, without the LTN restrictions, the original issues of high volumes of traffic on speeding will return to the residential streets, unquote. That the Council's response also, the Council's response also suggests that there's little or no funding available for alternative measures, which was the answer residents were given repeatedly before the LTN schemes came along. So given that we have bipartisan acknowledgement of the significant problem and support for a solution, if the LTNs are to be removed, will the committee now ask the Council's transportation team draw up a comprehensive package of speed reduction and road safety measures for each of the LTN areas? There's a question mark of that. Whilst these will be less effective at solving the issue than the LTNs themselves, please could this package of measures at least include 1, proper speed humps and not just speed cushions, which have proved entirely ineffective at addressing the speeding issue to date, and 2, appropriate width restrictions given the issues of HD3 through traffic, particularly on Pinnerview, where have been having a significant detrimental impact on residents' lives day and night, with lorries ignoring the way limit. But so that was the question. The answer is a lot shorter. I note your comments about the impact of removing LTNs and your request for effective road humps and width restrictions to limit goods vehicle traffic in the area. TARSAC will consider a recommendation to work towards introducing speed reduction in roads and streets with identified road safety issues. Right, okay. So we're on to number 8, Samantha.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Samantha.
Hi, yes. I'd like to know, for the public LTN consultation, when it was switched from being roadblocks to ANPR monitoring, who made that decision, and were the TARSAC committee members consulted prior to that being the formal consultation? Right,
thanks very much, Samantha. The response is the low traffic neighbourhoods use closures that do not permit vehicular access except for the emergency services. Following feedback from emergency services, particularly the London Ambulance Service, about roadblocks, it was decided that the sustainable method of continuing LTNs was to introduce ANPR cameras to limit vehicular access to the areas as set out in the consultation. Do you have a supplementary question, Samantha?
Yeah, sorry, that wasn't really, I think kind of the point. I was asking, who did the TARSAP committee decide on the wording for the consultation, and then with the result, does the transport portfolio holder make the final decision, or is it all of the cabinet?
As I say, as that's something question, you will get a written response on that. Okay, right. Thanks very much, Samantha. Right, Heshma, are you? Heshma.
Hi.
Yes, it's all yours.
Hi. With there being an overwhelming sense of support for road calming measures, the main roads such as Parkside Way, where there is an S-bend close to Southwood Park and Kingsfield Avenue, has seen many serious accidents, such as the one in February involving a white vehicle. Why would speed cameras not be considered on the S-bend? As looking at pictures of it, it was very, very serious. And this isn't the first time accidents like these have happened on the S-bend. And how will you enforce a 20-mile-per-hour throughout the roads?
Right, thanks very much, Esma. The response is speed cameras are only used in very specific circumstances and are implemented where set criteria are satisfied. The sites are agreed between Transport for London and the Metropolitan Police on that basis. In Parkside Way, there are no locations that meet this criterion. Have you got a supplementary question, Heshma?
Yeah, I do. Thank you. We are all very grateful that the council gave thousands of us the voice to finally have our say on LTNs. Myself and all the residents on my residential surrounding road are most grateful. The results of this consultation clearly show that the majority of the public strongly disagree to LTNs, but equally the public's strong disapproval to the proposal to amend them to ANPR is also apparent. We would be grateful if you could honour these results and stand by your promise that if it was shown that the majority didn't want LTNs or ANPR, that you would remove them. Can we trust that you will do the right thing by the public, despite the expected minority contentions, many of them unfounded, and remove them completely?
Right. Well, there was a question in there somewhere, wasn't there? Okay, but you will get a supplementary reply.
Thank you.
Yeah, for your question. Right. Okay. Number 10 is it David Willis? Mr. Willis. Is he here at all?
Chair, he doesn't seem to be present.
All right. So it's me again, isn't it? Right. All right. Right. Both the question and answer are not very long. Right. The question is, considering the clear result and mandate presented by results of the various LTN/cycling consultations in inverted commas, notably the street space and common place activities, both inverted commas, it is now apparent that the council has seriously underestimated their actual priorities so far as the transport needs for the residents are concerned. Accordingly, as TARSAP has a long-standing dedicated advisor as far as the minority cycling group is concerned, it is not time to also appoint an advisor on the panel who represents the majority motorists in the borough too. Right, the response is the introduction of the street space programme has been challenging for all local authorities across the country because these measures are introduced quickly to manage the change in the way people travel during the pandemic and using prescribed designs that could not be personalised for Harrow. The scale and speed of delivering this programme clearly created some issues, and that was to be expected given the circumstances. The advisors on TARSAP support the panel to consider the delivery of the transportation programme and are selected on that basis. The core aims of the Mayor's transport strategy and the Council's local implementation plan is to promote sustainable transport and less private car use, and advisors that can assist with delivering these objectives are preferred. Right, so that's the answer to that. And Next question is from Ben Wealthy. Yay, Ben. Hello again.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. So my question is, whilst the outcome of the consultation on new low traffic neighbourhood schemes and cycle lanes is clear, it's also clear that the issues they were designed to contribute to addressing, such as improving air quality, road safety, the vibrancy of local high streets and health and well-being remain. Bearing in mind these schemes were part of a top-down government initiative, what lessons has the Traffic and Road Safety Advisory Panel learned about how Harrow Council can lead more participatory conversations on future proposals so that we can tackle these challenges in a positive and practical way as a community?
Okay, thanks very much, Ben. The response is as follows. The key lesson learned regarding streets-based schemes is that extensive public engagement is required in advance to consider the impacts of schemes and to take account of local opinions. As these schemes involve significant changes to people's lifestyles, it is necessary to seek their feedback and buy into projects before they commence, to monitor and evaluate the schemes during trials and provide regular feedback before making any final decisions. Have you got a supplementary question, Ben, at all?
Thank you, Chair. Just a brief supplementary. Can the panel consider good practice from community engagement from other local authorities and make formal recommendations to the Cabinet about future proposals?
Okay, yeah. Well, yeah, you will get a written response to that supplementary question. Right, thanks very much, Ben. Right, question 12 is a resident of LTN 02 who is, so I'm going to have to read the question and the answers. And it's quite a long question, I'm afraid. Right. The question is, the definition of a successful, in inverted commas, outcome to the LTN 02 trial was provided by David Eaglesham, Harrow Head of Traffic, Highways and Asset Management on 25th of August 2020. A positive outcome would be a reduction in vehicle traffic within the LTNs and increase in pedestrian and walking with no significant adverse effects on congestion and delay on the main roads. This will need to be assessed over a period of time, up to 6 months, in order to allow traffic patterns to settle and establish any meaningful longer-term changes in traffic patterns. Comparing the Council's own data for July 20 and Feb 21, the outcomes of the trial in LTN 02 appears to be as follows. Vehicle traffic within the LTNs was reduced by 66% since the start of trial on weekdays between July 20 and Feb 21. This is a success. Pedestrian traffic has increased by 85% between July 20 and February 2021. This is a success. Cumulative queue lengths on surrounding main road junctions have increased by 2% on weekdays and actually decreased by 20% on weekends. Please note that schools were not open for either July 20 or February 21 surveys. The LTN trial, other LTN trials, have therefore comprehensively achieved the success in inverted commas criteria originally defined by the Council at the beginning of the trial. Despite this, the recommendation in the report is to remove these schemes with immediate effect, and which, as stated in section 2.85 of the report, will definitely result in traffic increasing on both the LTN roads and on surrounding main roads and will cost £25,000. In other words, the report is recommending that Harrow Council choose to spend £25,000 to guarantee that traffic and accompanying pollution will increase on all roads over the coming months and years, while at the same time losing the opportunity to learn anything concrete about how LTNs function in Harrow outside COVID restrictions. Considering the success of the actual trial against the stated criteria to date and its critical importance to Harrow's strategic objectives, Could you please explain, therefore, why the trial of the existing LTN O2 scheme is not being considered for extension to see if public support increases over time, as has been achieved in other successful LTNs areas, and to verify any remaining uncertainty regarding COVID impacts? Right, the reply is a lot more briefer. Your points regarding the impacts on travel behaviour during the trials and what might happen when the schemes are removed are well explained. However, public support for measures is also important to the Council, and all public engagement has consistently shown a majority negative sentiment towards the schemes, which cannot be ignored. It is for members to consider this matter, and all the information is available in the reports for them to make an informed decision. Right, right. 13 is Jocelyn Levine. I don't think he's here. Is he here?
No, Chair.
No? Sorry?
No, he's not, Chair.
Right. All right. So must be bored with my voice by now. I'm bored with my voice now. Right, anyway, the question is, will Harrow Council commit to continue traffic and pollution monitoring on both the existing LTN 02 and LTN 04 roads and surrounding roads so that a data baseline can be established for future reference, regardless of whether or not the trial schemes are removed? And will Harrow Council likewise commit to reporting on the outcomes of each future task app, so residents are kept informed about how much the traffic and pollution is increasing in their roads year on year? The response is, Harrow will continue to monitor traffic levels in the area to assess any changes in traffic levels or patterns as a part of delivering the transportation work programme. The monitoring of air quality is currently being reviewed and as a part of service improvements under consideration at the moment. Right, the final question is for Veronica. I'm sorry you had to wait so long, Veronica.
That's okay, very much, Chair. My question is, according to the Harrow Walking, Cycling and Sustainable Transport Strategy, the overall target for share of daily trips to be made by cycle or public transport in Harrow is 64% in 2041. This is a very general and distant aspiration, and we'll probably none of us be here at that time. Given that the current mode share of cycling is around 1% of Harrow, what are the panels for Harrow's mode share of cycling in 2025 and 2030?
Right, thanks very much, Veronica. Right, the response. The target is to achieve 64% of sustainable travel by 2041. It's a longer term aspiration set in the Mayor's transport strategy. The Council's Walking, Cycling and Sustainable Transport Strategy sets short-term targets over a 3-year window to monitor the effectiveness of interventions introduced. Targets for 2025 and 2030 have not yet been set. The targets in the strategy will be reviewed and updated this year for the next 3-year period, taking account of the current trend data. It is accepted that the take-up of cycling in Harrow is still relatively low, and initiatives to improve cycle infrastructure and provide cycle training and education will be required to significantly increase the number of cyclists. Right, do you have a supplementary question, Veronica, at all?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So my supplementary is, will the low traffic neighbourhoods your target more or less difficult to achieve?
Well, as I say, you will get a written reply to that supplementary question. Right, okay, so that brings us to the end of the public question. Right, thank you. Can we now move on to item 5, which is petition? Can I ask, first of all, have any councillors have any petitions they want to put forward? No, and any other members of the public? No. I think we have a petition from Richard Herbert, if he's here. Richard. Yes. Right, you have a petition. You have 1 minute, Richard.
Thank you. The reason for the petition, and I'm representing the residents of the Croft in Pinner, is parents of the children attending the Buckingham Prep and Longfield Primary regularly block the entry and exit way to the Croft, making safe turns impossible. We are asking for a review of the situation for 5 reasons. 1, safety of children, both those of residents and the children being dropped off. 2, road safety, blocked entry and exits to Farm Avenue and the Croft, parking restrictions ignored, and unsafe vehicle abandonment, limiting visibility on Rayners Lane, increasing the chance of an RTA. 3, unsociable behaviour, blocking pavements by parking over them, despite double yellow lines, and blocking access and egress from residents' homes. 4, increased pollution and impact on residents and their children due to the idling SUVs in a tiny road and those around it. And finally, 5, due to verbal abuse suffered by residents asking parents not to park illegally and the risk of confrontation. An example recently where a female resident was followed back into the Croft and to her home and confronted on her driveway.
Okay, right. Thanks very much, Richard. It will be referred to the officers and you will get a response for that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Richard. Andrew, did you have your hand up? Andrew?
No, Chair.
Oh, good. All right. Okay. Right. Okay. So that's a petition. We're on to deputations now. I think there is one deputation, which is a roadblock at West Harrow Station. Nicholas Creasy. Are you? I saw you earlier. Nicholas, great, good man. Right. You have up to 10. Are you doing this on your own, or are there other people doing it?
I'm doing this bit on my own.
All right. Okay. Well, you have up to 10 minutes. You don't have to speak for the full 10 minutes, but yeah, up to 10 minutes. And then members of the panel can ask you questions up to 10 minutes. So, Nicholas, the floor is yours.
My name's Nick Creasy and I own the corner shop, Happy Superstore at number 2 Merivale Road.
Mm-hmm.
The shop is a convenience store selling tin food, frozen food, milk, drinks and alcohol, top books for electric meters, etc. And most things you would associate with corner shop. My takings are roughly about 50% down since the roadblock at West Harrow Station was put in. Some of this is due to the COVID restrictions where people have moved to deliveries from major supermarkets. But I have lost about 30% due to the roadblocks, with shoppers coming in only for convenience products, really. The roadblock, by restricting through traffic at West Harrow Station, severely affected my would-be profits, which, as you probably know, are finely balanced. Because of this drop, it's made me consider selling the shop unless the planters are removed. I speak for the shopkeepers and businesses in my area who are all against the road closure and have signed my deputation. Namely, the shops on Vaughan Road, Lifestyle Express, K7 Enterprises, Good Chef, LH Plumbing, and the single shop on Butler Road, Harrow Village Store. I also have, like the other shopkeepers, problems with my delivery drivers, and I have lost count of the number of times I've had to explain the detour to get to my shop. The delivery drivers seem to change each week, so I'm always answering this. And on a number of occasions, they've failed to deliver because of the roadblocks. You've already heard about this from disgruntled West Harrow residents. I never get involved with these sort of things and let the council do what they're elected to do. However, the locals in my shop and almost everyone coming in have expressed a view that the closure is against their wishes. After the event consultation was worded in a way that which made it more difficult to object. There was no box to say, let's remove the roadblocks, which I thought was reason for the consultation. Again, I stress again, the road closure has severely affected my business, and I hope it will take the recently submitted consultation seriously, where 2/3 want the planters and the roadblocks removed, so that I can try and return my business and other shopkeepers can return their businesses back into profit.
Right. Okay. Thanks very much, Nicholas. Obviously, you've seen the recommendations for tonight, but it's obviously it's up to the panel to make a final decision. Are there any questions at all to Nicholas on his? Yeah. No. Any questions at all? Oh, I think you silenced the panel, Nicholas. So well done. But,
well, there was a subsidiary point that I was going going to mention as well, because obviously I drive, my missus drives, and there's garages the other side of West Harrow Station. My partner had a tyre go flat, and she had to go all the way round via Ridgeway and Imperial Drive just to get to a garage to get a tyre changed.
Right. Okay. Right. Okay. Thanks very much. Amy, is this a quick question? Or?
Just a quick remark for the resident that I think the silence isn't to do that with a lack of consideration, but I think this will come on later in the agenda. But just one quick question: if this was to be done again, what would you have done differently in terms of the how have you found the consultation process throughout the year, and what would you have done differently?
Oh, I think you're on mute, Nicholas.
How do you mean with that?
Yeah. Well, look, the scheme has obviously been very, very unpopular. What more do you think? What would have you done differently to sort of make sure that the council never sort of makes this sort of error in judgment again?
Well, to be honest, I'm not a councillor, but in my view, they should have consulted everyone before they even thought about putting these planters in, to get everyone's views. And then this obviously wouldn't happen again. I mean, we all woke up, we went to sleep one night, no planters. Woke up next morning, there's planters. As I said, I've got deliveries coming. My delivery driver's going, how do I get to your shop now? And when it's easy for them just to come straight through to my shop and then go out the way they go out. Is now that, I mean, can you imagine a HGV? Because I have HGVs come to my store sometimes, turning around in that little space at West Harrow Station. It's not good.
Okay, thanks, Nicholas. Yeah, I think that was mentioned in one of the replies to the questions about having public, extended proper consultation before the schemes come in. Right? And Jonna.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Nicholas, for actually coming and doing your deputation. We understand the problems that the businesses are facing, especially in West Harrow area. The silent is not because we don't agree with you. Silent is because we're going to be making a decision on LTNs very soon today. And so I think less said is better, and more said when we are actually making a decision is all I can say to you.
Okay.
I totally agree with you. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Jonna. Right, if there's no more question, can I thank Nicholas for again doing the deputation. If you want to hang on, Nicholas, we'll now be going on to the LTN, so you should get a decision fairly soon, I hope. Right, okay, thank you very much. Right, we're now on to item 7, 8 and 9, which are basically the street space 6-monthly reviews, and they cover the low traffic neighbourhoods, the cycle lane and the school streets. So that if the panel is happy with, I suggest we the following to how we go about looking at these. I'll ask for a brief introduction by the officers, and then I'll split it up. I'll ask for any questions to officers on each scheme, and then I'll follow up by any comments. So it's questions first, then comments, and when that's finished, we'll then move to the recommendations for each scheme separately. So in other words, we'll do the LTN first, look at the recommendation, then the cycle lane, then the school streets. And just to clarify, the recommendations will be on the agenda at the next cabinet meeting, which is a week today on the 29th of April. Right, so if we can go on to item 7, which is the low traffic neighbourhood schemes. Can I have Barry or David or somebody or Mike to just briefly introduce the scheme, please?
Thank you, Chair. It's David. I'll be introducing the report for the panel.
Okay, David.
Okay. So this the first report is to do with the low traffic neighbourhoods. I'll be brief because I think most people in the panel are very familiar with the history behind the schemes. But in short, it was an initiative, the London Street Space Programme that Transport for London initiated, and low traffic neighbourhoods was one of the key interventions that boroughs were invited to take forward. The borough proposed a number of sites. These were considered at the TARSAT panel, special TARSAT panel in August, and 4 locations were approved for trials, and they were introduced around the end of September, beginning of October. So you had Headstone South, Francis Road area, Vaughan Road area, and Southfield Park area. The panel agreed a monitoring process, and there has been regular monitoring undertaken. That included receiving opinion surveys from people via an engagement portal, regular traffic surveys, and we had a monthly review to keep members up to date with the progress of the trials, and also there was the ability for decisions to be made to make amendments whenever those were required. Adjustments have been made to the schemes as problems have arisen, so there were some closures removed as a consequence of congestion occurring on main roads. That was done in November. There was also some issues with emergency service access, and we made some further adjustments to closures within the schemes around about December, January. Towards the end of the 6-month trial period, a consultation was organised. This was to consider possibility of alternative arrangements being made for the LTNs. To summarise, I think that there have been some increases in walking in the area, but there have also been difficulties with boundary roads and congestion on roads. That's fairly evident. And I think that all of the engagement that's been undertaken, there has been quite a strong negative view of the schemes throughout. So that seems to be very, very consistent. So the recommendations for the panel to consider are to make a recommendation to Cabinet to remove the schemes with immediate effect, and also to recommend to the corporate director community, following consultation with the PH, to work towards introducing speed reductions in roads and streets with identified road safety issues where budget and enforcement constraints allow, and also to undertake a review of the Francis Road width restriction. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thanks, David. Sorry, I should have mentioned earlier, I've got councillors Marikar, Fitzpatrick, Osborne, and possibly Simon Brown are backbenching and want to speak on this item. Does the panel agree they can all speak? Yeah, good. Okay. I presume they want to come in on the comment bit rather than the questions bit, so we'll wait, but they are limited to 3 minutes. Okay, so can I ask, are there any questions, first of all? Just questions, not comments. Right, Anoop.
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of considering options for the low traffic neighbourhoods going forward, clearly there isn't a mandate from the consultation to convert them to ANPR schemes, but there have been benefits of reducing traffic and making the area better for walking and cycling. So could there be a consideration for creating a school street within the West Harrow area near Vaughan School, which would mean that restrictions would be in place just for a few hours each day, and to maintain that safe environment during school time, but allow more convenience at other times? And secondly, for the Headstone South area, would there be a consideration of keeping certain planters by doing local consultations on enabling some quiet, safe cycle routes, for example, near Beresford Road or Victor Road or Canterbury Road, where they don't impact motorist journey times too much and don't impact through traffic?
Okay, thanks, David, can you respond to that, please?
Yes, I think obviously we will listen very, very carefully to all the comments that we'll receive this evening, and we'll consider any suggestions that are made. There is a recommendation for the panel to consider with regard to reviewing road safety issues, and so within, if the panel are minded to take that forward, then in that context we could consider any suggestions that fit within that remit.
Thanks, David.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so further questions now, Amy, then Anjana.
Thank you, Chair. My question is about paying for the removal of the LTNLs. I note that this will come out of the highways budget, which the report says is up to 25,000. Can we get some clarification on why it costs so much, if it literally is just moving the plant plots, and why it costs so much? And also, secondly, can we get confirmation and reassurance that these plots can be reused around the borough and district centre, so that we can reduce any further wastage from these schemes?
Yeah. David or somebody?
Okay, thank you, Chair. So the cost is not just about moving the planters. That's probably a smaller part of the cost, but there are a lot of traffic signs in the area which need to be removed, road markings that need to be removed. So there's a package of things that need to be done. The £25,000 is, it's an estimate, so it's possible it could be a slightly cheaper cost than that. But I've given, I've made allowances for all the possible things that could happen. With regard to planters, actually, I've got a queue of people who want to use them, so I don't think we will have a problem with re-provisioning them. Actually, there's interest in having them in Harrow parks, so we will consider all the requests that we've had and try to make sure that they're used appropriately.
Right.
Thank you,
Thanks
Chair.
so much, David. Thank you. Anjana, you had a question, was it?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I know the finance question has already been asked, but what I would like to find out is that the funding, when these schemes were implemented, we had asked questions, and I have asked this question many a times, and I was assured that the funding will be put aside, to remove this. Supposedly, it was supposed to be temporary schemes. If you didn't put money aside, then you clearly never intended these schemes to be temporary, and have obviously been dishonest to the residents, is what I think. So I really want to ask question again. Wasn't there, we were told that the money to implement and to remove will be coming out from the TfL money that they applied for. So why is it now coming out of the highways maintenance revenue budget? Because that means it is actually taking away from the residents this money. And as we are always complaining about not council being underfunded and whatnot, this could have been used towards reducing council tax for people. So can I have an answer to that, please? Thank you. And also, sorry, another thing regarding the boxes. There are many people, as David said, are queuing up. But I think it is one other place to be considered is Harrow, where it will look really nice, and I think the councillors will be very greatly receive them, so that people can actually see it and appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm glad the planters will have a safe home somewhere. David, about the finances.
Okay, when TfL asked us for information about schemes and bids, they did not ask us to include for costs of removal. In fact, they only asked us for costs of implementation, and they were they were scrutinising the costs quite closely, because that's what they wanted. And I think the context was that they wanted to maximise the limited budget that had been provided by government, to maximise the full effect for dealing with the effects of the pandemic. So it is a question that London boroughs have been asking TfL about, what will happen if schemes need to be removed, and we haven't, well, they haven't indicated that they would fund that. So I know that some boroughs are having to deal with the fact that certain schemes are being taken out, and the inference I've been given is that it has to be dealt with by the borough. So the answer to your question is that it doesn't mean that there was an intention to keep the schemes, but it just means that TfL were being quite careful about the funding when they allocated it. We didn't have an allowance for removal.
Okay.
With regard to the planters, I mean, there is a lot of interest in re-providing them. I think, given the interest that there is, what I may do is I may put some suggestions to the portfolio holder and just make sure that, the decision as to how they're used is approved properly. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, David. You have a further question, John?
Yes, I do. This actually means that obviously you clearly didn't find out what happens to it afterwards and not even thought through that if you're going to implement this scheme and if it doesn't work for the residents, then it will have to come out. So it is a shame that the recommendation obviously was whatever it was. I think council should have thought through hard enough to make sure before implementing these schemes to make sure that there is money to remove it as well. So I personally feel that even I wasn't sure about it, that the money was actually going to come out of highways maintenance budget, because we need that money for a lot of road that needs lots of maintenance in the whole of Harrow. Thank you.
Right, thank you, John. Right, if I haven't seen any other hands, so if there's no further questions, can we move on to comments, please? Obviously, you're aware of the recommendations here, so are there any comments? Amit first, and I'll go on to Pamela.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to start by welcoming and supporting these recommendations. And I just want to say that as TARSAP members, it's usually non-political, and we've had to make some very, very difficult decisions. Often we've had to decide schemes where we've had 51% for and 49% against. But this, for us, has been a very, very easy decision to make, because I've never seen such overwhelming support for either way. But I just want to make this point, and I think it's important that we should never have got to this stage. And I just want to run through very briefly the timeline. I mean, I know we're going through unprecedented times, but when we were first informed about these plans last summer, I appreciate there wasn't a time for a consultation, but we sounded out what residents wanted, and in Stanmore and Cannons, we sounded out residents who said they were against it, and I'm really, really grateful to the panel for that special meeting in August where we managed to take those schemes out and we saved this issue in Stanmore and Cannons. And it's a shame that in other areas this wasn't done, because as councillors I believe we should always have the finger on the pulse of what residents want. Anyway, we went over, and again we had these overwhelming petitions in the autumn. I've never seen such support for petitions. There were thousands and thousands of signatures, 5, 6, 7,000. Again, these were ignored, which I think was a huge blow to democracy. Then we had the common space consultations online. Again, residents felt very aggravated that no one was listened to. There was failure to engage with emergency services. There were more petitions at TARSAP meetings, those long meetings that we had over the winter, nothing was done. And then we had this final consultation, as if it wasn't bad enough, where residents were really tired that we're asking them again what they feel, and even though they felt that they've not been listened to. It's been a waste of taxpayers' money. It's been a waste of officers' time. And I think these schemes have been bad because they've actually increased inequality. Whilst these LTNLs have reduced traffic and congestions in the areas, they've increased traffic, they've doubled traffic in the areas around it, which has increased pollution, and sort of it exposes huge inequalities. And I just want to sort of make that point that going forward, we should never let this happen. We should always listen to residents, and you know, we're all human, we do get things wrong. We could have easily have, you know, maybe in August it was too early, maybe in autumn it was too early, but we all knew that something was wrong here. We've never ever seen such opposition to such schemes, so we could have easily as a panel said, look, listen, you know, we have to support the residents. When we've got 7,000-8,000 residents against the scheme, something is not quite right yet. So I fully welcome these schemes, but as we've seen from the deputations today, it's drastically affected livelihoods, businesses, and we need to make sure that as a panel we never get to this position again. Thank you.
Thanks, Annie. I mean, we have now had a proper consultation, but the whole thing was very rushed at the beginning, and we didn't have to. We got the funds very quick. We had to spend them very quickly, so we had to do things at haste without proper consultation. But
like I say, in the summer we didn't have to spend the money.
I think we did do the right thing in responding to the government's request. But anyway, we can talk about that endlessly, I'm sure. Right, can I move on to the backbenchers now that I've indicated? Pamela, I think you first. You have
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I hope Councillor
when you've got 30 seconds.
We'll go back to. I hope Councillor Jogia will take this up with the government for imposing such a short deadline on us. They don't listen to us and they keep cutting our funding. But what I want to ask is, there are lots of support for some measures, traffic calming measures within Headstone South. We have had people from Cunningham Park for years saying that their cars are damaged, they can't park. We need to do something. Residents on Beresford Road have found that having the planters there have been really positive because it's stopped drug dealers from activity there. And equally, people have mentioned Southfield Park. The residents are contacting me all the time saying that they need measures there. So going forward, we really do need some proposals to think about how we tackle the increasing traffic and having some kind of traffic calming measures. Now, I would urge the panel to look at whether there's anything that could be salvaged from this for the residents who do want it. So I think has been said that Beresford Road, for example, that it wouldn't, if it still had the planters, cause any problems with traffic outside of those roads. Whether anything could be done for Cunningham Park to think about easing the problems of the cars, using it as a rat run, and also for the parking for residents there. And also, as I said, for Canterbury Road, but also please don't get rid of the planters too soon, because I would hope that we would do a proper consultation in the way that Harrow usually does proper consultations. Sadly, it was not possible this time, but if we have some measures put in place in the future and we properly engage with residents, we don't listen to the government, we don't have that diktat this time, we do it in the way that Harrow normally consults, such as with CPZs and everything else. So I would just urge you to think, is there some way that you could think about the residents that you've heard from roads where it is possible to have some limited restrictions, and obviously before doing so that there is proper consultation in place to hear from residents. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Pamela. I think that is part of the recommendation. We'll look at individual roads, and also we had the public question about Beresford Road, so we'll be looking at that as well. Right, thanks. Paul, you're next, I think. Then Anjana.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Jogia said a lot of what I wanted to say, but you know, that's probably why I appointed him to be our lead on PASAP, because I knew he would reflect my thoughts. I just want to say, obviously, I welcome the recommendations. We have a slight objection to the school streets thing, but we'll get to that. I'm just really disappointed and frustrated it took us so long to get here. As Councillor Joggi has said, we've gone through a number of things where it was very clear that these schemes weren't welcome. It was very clear to us in the wards where we have Conservative councillors that these schemes weren't wanted in the form that they were proposed. It was very clear from the initial pre-engagement that these things weren't wanted. It was very clear when they were introduced from the petitions that these things weren't wanted. It was very clear as the consultation was going on while the schemes were in place that they weren't wanted. It was very clear from a second petition calling on the Headstone South councillors to resign that these things weren't wanted. When we finally managed to get to see the letter from the ambulance service, which we only got to see due to an FOI request from residents and some persistence from me, that the London Ambulance Service were against these type of schemes. When we finally got to see the correspondence with the London Fire Brigade, we finally got to see that they were against these type of schemes. And when we finally got to see the correspondence from the police, it was very clear the police were against these type of schemes, albeit the emergency services were not against LTNs in total, just the way Harrow was doing them. And it was only when I insisted that the corporate director met with these emergency services that these schemes were altered. And I think it's worth noting that all of this is taking place against this global pandemic with everyone with lots of stress in their lives and businesses under tremendous pressure. And had we just taken a pause when we suggested much earlier on in this process, we could have saved residents a lot of stress. We could have saved businesses a lot of problems with their trade. We could have actually been able to save officer time and allow officers to come forward with some of the schemes that we're now talked about. Instead of, on this day, which is Earth Day, taking away cycle schemes and taking away low traffic neighbourhoods, we could actually be proposing and putting forward proposals that were positive. And as I said at the beginning of this saga, the only way these schemes will ever be sustainable is bringing local people along with us. Instead, the council ignored people's concerns. They denied repeatedly clear video evidence showing issues with these schemes. They sought to belittle and dismiss the clear majority of residents. They tried at each stage to tweak the schemes and do as little as possible in order to hope the residents will either get fed up or just give up in despair. My view is we need to step back and review the entire strategy we have. There are clearly issues both in terms of cycling when we get to that and traffic and speeding, but we need to just look at how we do it and how we don't push the problems around to other parts of the borough. And finally, I'd just like to say that we should get rid of this idea that we know best and that we'll just put these things in and eventually everyone will suddenly accept the wisdom of our great ideas and will be delighted that they have it and be asking for them to be kept in perpetuity. The reality is residents know their area, local ward councillors should know their area. And I'd finally just like to end by paying tribute to the local residents who have really put in a tremendous amount of time in this what's a very difficult time for everyone to try and get their views heard and to try and get these schemes removed. And I really hope tonight we can take that big step to recommend to the Cabinet that these schemes go, these roads are opened again, and then we can go and actually look, because they have to all go to build confidence back and to build people with you to get future schemes in place. Otherwise, the level of trust will be even less than it already has been. The communities will be even more divided than they already have been. And I think it's time to bring people back together, to come up with schemes from a fresh drawing board and try and deal with some of these problems. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Paul. Right, Anjana, then Karima next. Anjana.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to go back to the comments. I know it was directed to Councillor Jogia, but I would like to say stop the blame game on the government. This was actually Harrow Council wanting to do this. There were many other boroughs who decided not to take this funding, and we could have done exactly the same if we and this administration would have known the residents of Harrow. They would have never done this and not had any of this blame game going on. So let me be very clear that this is nothing to do with the government. This was something that this administration and council decided to go for the funding and thought they will just go and implement and everything will be hunky-dory. unfortunately, life is not like that. Life is not as simple. And you have seen how much misery we have put through the residents. And hopefully we will take this recommendation forward and make a very good decision that, as Councillor Osborne said, we will remove all of the LTNs, and we'll talk about cycling and school when it comes to, I will have something to say, but at the moment, remove all of the LTNs and start from scratch. And as mentioned, that Harrow is very good at doing consultation. Yes, they did do consultation so many times, 3-4 times on this particular LTNs. And what is the results? We have all seen it. So let's not beat around the bush and see that you're going to get any other results, and go forward with the recommendation. And as I say, I'm for all of it to go and not parts of it to go. But please stop the blame game and stop blaming the government about it, because it was Harrow's decision to ask for this money and implement it and make people's life hell. Thank you.
All right, great. Thanks. Karima's next. You have 3 minutes, Karima. Then David Perry.
I'm really disappointed with this political game the Tory party is doing. Why? I mean, Georgia, I never expected you to talk like that. I never expected Paul Osborne to talk like that. I expect from Anjana, because she makes a mountain of a mole, you know, a big palaver out of nothing. Can I?
Karima,
I'm here.
Karima, don't criticize.
Karima, please stop this, Chair. A point of order.
No, I appreciate what's been said.
Yeah.
Karima, just concentrate on the scheme, please.
Yeah. Thank you to the officers. Thank you, officers. You all are excellent officers. You all did a consultation. We went back, we asked them, we will do a consultation. Now the consultation is done. Come on, don't play political game between these party games. The Harrow Council officers with this COVID period has done the maximum. I thank the panel, I thank the chair for going back, and Washa Palmer for going back and doing a consultation, as she is the portfolio for that. So I can't understand still this telling it is not a political game and all this nonsense. Stop this. We did a consultation. With little funding, we are doing so much. We can't make Jack Robinson making the whole of Harrow different, but we have done the consultation, not like the CPZ when you all were in the in administration. What you all did to West Harrow is tremendous, and still they do understand. We as a Labour administration, we listen and we will implement and we will go back and do our consultation. Come on, Anjana, stop this bragging about, don't blame the government. We blame the government. Thank you. Thank you, officers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Karima. Right, David Perry, then Anoop Shah, I think, is after that, and then Parmena after that. So, David, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. If I could, in my contribution to the discussion on the LTN, I hopefully can take some of the pressure and the heat out of the debate already. And although there's sort of strong opinions on both sides, I think it has to be acknowledged straight up, the result of the consultation. And we've had deputations, questions, emails, letters from both sides, whether it be whilst the LTNs are in or the pro-cyclist lobby, environmentalist lobby, if you call them that, since the recommendations have come to light. But I think it's important to talk to the report just briefly. It is a very detailed report. It has been a lot of officer time. The consultation is overwhelming. And I think in the heart of hearts of the senior leadership at the council, if they had their time again, would they do it exactly the same? I think the way that they're approaching some of the other schemes, one of them be school streets in the future, they're already learning those lessons. And I think that's something which has come out of this process. But what I would like to do with my contribution is to first and foremost formally acknowledge and support the recommendations which have been put forward by the officers. It's been made very clear from senior leadership at the council around consultation. It is overwhelming, as I have said, but I think it's important to acknowledge the reasons as to why the attempt was made. And I think for any residents listening, it's important to acknowledge that none of the members or councillors on this forum are members of the ruling 9 of Cabinet. We're an advisory panel, and so hopefully our comments will be taken on board. But everybody around this forum, I'm looking at the screen with all councillors and advisors, every member of council on Harrow Council wants safer streets, wants people walking more, wants people cycling more, better air quality. That is unanimous, but sometimes there's a slight difference as to how you go about it. And I think the way that this has been done, I think the best intentions was at heart, and we've got to the right decision in the end. But what I do want to highlight is I think it's important for people who do want their children to cycle to school, to walk to school, better air quality. I think it is important not to just take LTNs in the round on its own, because I'm an experienced member of this council and have been on for 15 years, and I just went back 3 years and I tried to see what the council's been doing to try to tick off more people walking, more cycling, better quality, safer streets. And 3 years ago, we've introduced 6 different schemes around 20-mile-per-hour zones. We've introduced more zebra crossings in the borough, quiet rays. There's Jubilee routes, which have been introduced around schools such as Avanti. There's improved access. And 3 years ago, I think the council spent around nearly £700,000. The very next year, it was about £700,000 on this particular type of agenda as to what is being removed today across the whole borough, in Pinner, in North Harrow, Rayners Lane, Queensbury, Belmont, Stanmore, Kentons, Central Harrow. And much of these schemes tick a lot of the agenda and the aims in which LTNs have tried to achieve. The latest year just gone is about £400,000 worth of investment. Now, in total, over 3 years, I think it's important to mention £1.8 million worth of spend has been contributed to trying to make our streets safer. This agenda, you only have to look on BBC News tonight, they're talking about the environment, all world leaders. This agenda isn't going away, it will continue, but just not in this form of LTNs. And the residents have spoken loud and clear with regards to consultation, and it's important that we listen, and the leadership at the council have done that. One thing which I would like to do, please, Chair, just to finish, is I do feel that there is a recommendation which is missing from what has been put forward, and I will, after I've read it out to the panel, will copy and paste it into the chat of the group, and for members of the public watching to be able to see. But I do think where we have had a draining and a loss of funding with regards to Transport for London and other areas, I think the council's capital spend, which we spend millions of pounds across the council already, I think it's important from this panel, and what I've heard so far from some of the backbenchers and some of the questioners who are looking at themselves as losing this consultation, I've already explained where I think they're not losing because of all the other schemes that have gone on this agenda over the last 3 years. I do think it's incumbent upon us to send up to Cabinet that we would like them to review that capital spend. So if there is any opportunities, this panel feels we can promote cycling, road safety, better air quality, more people walking safe around our schools, that there is a ring-fence pot of money. So if I can, Chair, I will read out, because I know our Democratic Services colleagues will want the exact wording, which I will post. But I would like to propose this amendment, if possible, that the panel recommend to the Corporate Director of Community, following consultation with the portfolio holder for environment and Cabinet, to review the council capital programme in order to ring-fence dedicated additional funding to promote relevant walking, cycling and road safety measures and schemes. It is an advice. I hope that will draw cross-party support with that amendment. And finally, I think it's already been said by Councillor Osborne, is thank you to members of the public and to residents, because the council are trying to do good. Do we get everything right? No. Do we listen when we do formal consultations? Yes. And to participate, as we often say, and Councillor Joggy always promotes this point, to get involved in the local democratic process is positive, and sometimes people only get involved when they want to shout and argue back. That's fine, that's what we're here to do, and that's why we've listened tonight and happy to support the recommendation, as is the report, and promote my amendment as to Chair.
Thanks, David. Is your amendment?
I second it.
Seconded by James. Yeah. Right. Okay. So we have the original amendments plus the original recommendation. Sorry, plus the amendment which is proposed by Councillor Perry, seconded by Councillor Lee. Okay. So I've got Anu now. Then Pamana is next. And I think it should be on the, yeah, you put your thing up, yeah, okay, right, I know.
Thank you, Councillor Perry, for proposing additional ring fence funding. I think that is much needed so that we can have a consistent programme of improvements over the years rather than relying on sporadic funding. And just a point about the broader strategy for low traffic neighbourhoods. They are an important tool for reducing traffic and increasing walking and cycling, and in general they're well supported by the public, as shown by public surveys. And the boroughs that have taken the street space funding and been able to use it successfully had an ongoing programme and an ongoing strategy, because it is important that they're done properly, and that this engagement and then the implementation is correct, and the trials are kept in place for long enough in order to show a benefit. So I'd recommend that the council learns from these trials and puts together a programme of low traffic neighbourhoods for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I've got Palmana, then James, I think. Palmana.
Thank you, Chair. So firstly, I just want to say Councillor Perry really summed up everything I wanted to say, but I'm just going to add a few points. Okay. Thanks to the officers for the detailed report. I found that very clear cut in terms of the response from residents, in terms of what we should be doing with these LTN schemes, and completely support Councillor Perry's additional recommendation, but also the recommendations in the report. And I just wanted to say, thank you to residents for engaging with us on this process, because it really shows us how democracy works, as mentioned by Councillor Perry and Councillor Jogya previously. This is, how we show people that we can actually listen to constituents as a council. But I just wanted to come back to a point that Councillor Osborne said, today is Earth Day. I'm not sure whether those on the panel really know what that means, but as we see through documentaries by David Attenborough and other scientific evidence, climate change is worsening, and our air quality is reducing. And so in order to tackle these issues, we all have a responsibility to take steps to try and do that in our small way. And if we don't do it, then we can't tackle it as a nation. And so I think it's really interesting, that we as councillors wouldn't have wanted to implement these changes in the way that they've been implemented at the moment. Obviously, as mentioned by my Labour colleagues and those in the backbenches, we would obviously like to do a consultation first before implementing. But I think there's a really interesting point to note that's been mentioned previously, but I just want to reiterate, in the report it states that the government Minister for Transport issued a statutory guidance to councils to implement this experimental scheme for 6 months, and it being nationally funded. And I think that this is really key, because it's in light of the situation we currently face with the pandemic. I know Councillor Osborne said, people are under extreme pressure, but actually I think this is an opportunity for us to try and get people to walk more, cycle more, and reduce air pollution. And that is really where I think the intention was really clear from the Conservative government, because the British government is chairing the UN Climate Change Conference this year. And so I think the intention there was very clear, and it was a positive intention. And so I think we can't take away from that. But what I would like to see is the recommendations from the report being implemented, specifically the 20 miles per hour speed limit, that being still very popular. But yeah, it's great to see that the residents have engaged with this process, and just to reiterate that the council has listened now. You know, this was an experimental process, a scheme that was put in for 6 months. Now we've heard officially what everyone thinks, and I think the majority has spoken that they don't want these schemes anymore, and so we should go with that as a council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, James and Jana.
Yeah, I'd just like to say it's been a very hard year since COVID, and you know, decisions had to be made quickly, whether right or wrong. And you know, I just want to say it's been hard listening to some of the stories from residents, business owners, and etc. on the effects of these schemes. And it's been very heated. For me personally, reading the emails and looking at the feedback and trying to see how we can move forward. And I think the best way we could have was the full consultation. And I can say that we should and we will listen to the democratic will of the people and fully implement the recommendations in the report for the removal. And I think it's very important to let the public know that we do listen to them. We've sent out letters to them so they can respond back. There's been a lot of social media coverage, etc. And there will be changes to the schemes. Going forward, lessons will be learnt and will be acted on. There'll be better consultation going forward, and schemes will be better designed. We will take on board everything which has occurred over the last year and make sure that in the future it is better. At the end of the day, we all want to live in a better world, better air, and be healthier. So I'm looking forward to, you know, putting forward further recommendations to enhance a better way of living. But yeah, that's me concluding on it. But thank you everyone in the public, all the councillors and officers and the chair.
Right, thanks, James and Jana. I think that's the last speaker. And
Thank you very much, Chair. Absolutely agree with it, because this was one of the amendment put in the budget by Councillor Osborne to do what Councillor Perry has just suggested. So absolutely no problem agreeing to that. But I have a little point to make that, you know, like we are doing a school space program, and I think we should actually also wait and see what we come out with the schools that are already, you know, under the review and have already been put in. So I think even that will help us to do our program in future properly. So I think we should also sort of take that into account, that we will wait for what comes out of those 4 schools that we have already introduced this street space program. We all want our Harrow residents to be healthy. So obviously we all support everything. This is not a cyclist against motorists. This is not walking against motorists or anything like that. So let's not make this into one against the other. We want everything in this borough. We want people to be healthy and look after the environment as well, because we all believe in it. But it is just how it is done is important. And what our residents want is the utmost important thing that we should be looking at, and not what we want. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Jana. I don't see any more speakers. Much to my amazement, I think we all agree on the recommendations that have been put forward tonight. So we've got the original recommendations on the agenda, plus the amendment moved by David Perry and seconded by James. So can we agree those recommendations, please? Is that all? Is that agreed by the panel? Yeah.
Agreed.
Oh, there we are. God, that was a long time, wasn't it? Right, great. Okay, so can we move on then to item 8, which is the cycle lanes? Just a minute.
Can I interrupt here for 2 minutes?
Oh,
I have to break my fast at 11 past. Is it possible to just take a 5-minute break at 11 past 8, just so I can go break my?
Oh yeah, sorry. I
agree.
Yes, 11 minutes past. So
Yeah.
That's about
Thank you.
6 or 7 minutes. Yeah.
And Councillor Ali is there as well, I guess, that he will want to do that.
Yeah. How long do you want to break for, Pamana?
Just 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes, Chair.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Right. Yeah. Sorry, I forgot about the Ramadan. Right. Okay. Right. So we might as well start then on cycle lanes and take a break in about 5 minutes or so. I think I have Councillor Greek here and Councillor Osborne would like to backbench again on this. But again, if we can go as before, so can I have the David or Barry to introduce cycle lane schemes, please?
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'll introduce the report. Just very briefly, the same context for these schemes as with the low traffic neighbourhood ones. So they were funded by government. They required specifically that road space reallocation took place, and in seeking to improve cycling, dual carriageways were used in order to be able to provide safe space for cyclists along direct routes. And 3 routes were introduced in the summer last year, one along Honeypot Lane, another on Sheepcote Road, and the final one on Uxbridge Road. Similar process was involved in undertaking monthly reviews and doing regular traffic studies and opinion surveys. Similar to the low traffic neighbourhoods, the cycle route schemes have also received a lot of negative sentiment all the way through the trials. And so the report is making the following recommendations. That the panel consider the information provided in the report and make a recommendation to Cabinet to remove the schemes with immediate effect, and also to recommend to the Corporate Director of Community, following consultation with the portfolio holder, to review the strategy with cycle schemes, and to also consider introducing speed reductions on Honeypot Lane and Uxbridge Road. On that point, so dual carriageways were at 40 mph speed limits before the schemes were introduced, and they are at 30 mph now because the cycle routes are in place. We would not be able to retain them until we had undertaken consultation with the Metropolitan Police over considering a 30 mph on a dual carriageway, because the police are responsible for enforcement and we have a statutory duty to consult with them over any proposals. There is the possibility that they may feel that it is difficult to enforce a 30 mph speed limit in a dual carriageway situation. So I'm just pointing out to the panel that it will be necessary to consult with the police before we could actually retain 30 mph limit without, with both traffic lanes available. That concludes my report, Chair.
Right. Okay. Well, we move on to questions. I've got a hand up, but I don't know who it's from.
Yeah. I know Honeypot Lane quite well. There is speed cameras on there. So in terms of enforcement, theoretically, you could just change the metrics used, I would have thought. Hello?
David.
Sorry about that, just a little bit of an icy issue. You're correct. There are speed cameras on Honeypot Lane. They can be adjusted for the speed limit. Of course, that is only at a point. We still are obliged to discuss that with the police and to seek their views. But yeah, you are correct in what you're saying.
Okay, thank you.
Right. I've got a note, but I've still got a hand up, but I'm not sure who the hand is from. Is there anybody else who wants to speak at all?
It's Councillor Stephen Greek.
Is it?
Yeah, he's got his hand.
Right. It's you, Stephen. Sorry, I didn't see. Okay. I think we've only got a couple of minutes now. Well, I'll tell you what, Stephen, do you want to come in now? Because you're limited to 3 minutes. Okay.
Okay.
And then we'll take a short break, and then when we get back, Anu can come in. Sorry, go on.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'll try and be as quick as I can. I'm speaking tonight regarding the council cycle scheme SC09 Uxbridge Road, Harrow Weald, on behalf of the 3 Harrow Weald councillors, myself, Pritesh Patel and Ramji Chauhan, and the many local residents who've raised concerns about this scheme. All 3 of us have strongly opposed this scheme from the start, along with many local residents. This is the 3rd time I've addressed TARSAP about this, along with numerous interventions we've made at cabinet and council meetings. I very much hope this is the last time we will need to do so. I'm very pleased to see that finally, after nearly 10 months and 89% opposition, we now have a recommendation to remove the council's unwanted, poorly designed, dangerous scheme. This is down to the many residents and councillor colleagues who fought so hard for so long to make our voices heard. I urge the panel to agree this recommendation and for Cabinet next week to finally listen to local residents and to remove this and the other schemes. As we've said all along, this is not about being pro or anti-cycling, it's about good or bad schemes. Residents are quite happy to support good, well-designed, well-consulted cycle schemes in suitable locations, as they've done in the past, and I'm sure will do in future. But this has always been a bad scheme for residents, for road users, and for many cyclists themselves. I won't repeat the many problems we've listed before, but essentially this scheme creates huge disruption and danger on a major arterial road for very little or no benefit. It squeezes up to 17,000 cars a day into a single traffic lane, causing congestion and pollution alongside a barely used ghost cycle lane. In fact, you often see people riding on the pavement next to the cycle lane, more people riding on the pavement next to the cycle lane than in the lane itself. I do take issue with paragraph 2.37 on page 63, which claims that ward councillors have been engaged with throughout the process. That has certainly not been our experience in Harrow Weald. The only communication we received about the scheme was an email with the plans 3 working days before it was installed, and then a meeting last week to tell us the consultation feedback. Instead, we've had to fight every step of the way to speak up for our residents. Had we been listened to from the start, perhaps all this disruption and wasted money could have been avoided. So not only should the council leadership finally remove these schemes, it should also learn important lessons. You can't deliver good quality schemes by ignoring residents and ward councillors. You can't simply remove entire traffic lanes and expect no adverse consequences. And you don't reduce car use by making people's lives more difficult, but by providing better quality alternatives. Thank you very much.
Right, thanks very much, Stephen. I think we'll take a short break now. When they come back, I've got Anoop and Paul would like to speak. So we'll break now and about 5 minutes, Paimona, is that okay?
Wait, can we extend it to 10? Sorry, I just want to eat something. Actually, I was just thinking 5 is not going to be enough.
All right,
Is
so
10 okay? Sorry.
I'll make it 12 minutes past 8. So if we come back at 22 minutes past 8, will that be all right? Yes, and also, I think Tony wants to speak as well, but I'll take all 3 when we get back after the break. Yeah? Okay, right. Thanks very much. See you in 10 minutes. Okay, if we can continue where we left off, I've got a new Paul, then Tony, I think, and then John. Yeah. Okay. All right. A note first, please.
Thank you, Chair. So 2 questions. First of all, in assessing the public's feelings about cycle lanes in Harrow, this report is based on commonplace feedback, which is unsolicited feedback that people have submitted to the website without any checks on how many responses an individual is submitting, or even sampling the population in an unbiased way. The Transport Minister Grant Shapps has advised that decisions should be, that the views of the population should be ascertained by means of population-based surveys. So the question is, why has Harrow not done a survey, or can Harrow do a survey to find out what people find out about cycle lanes? And my second question is, the recommendation is firstly to remove the schemes and secondly to review the infrastructure, but surely that is in the that's in the wrong order, because first of all you need to review the infrastructure and find out, see how the schemes fit into the infrastructure, and then decide what should happen to them.
Right. Thank you. David or Barry? David?
Yeah. Okay. With regard to point 1, so we were adopting surveys that accorded with general practice with London boroughs. I think engagement portals have been found to be quite good ways of getting comments, and certainly you can see from the level of feedback that we've had, there has been quite good representation. The company that looks after the website does check for any unusual activity, and they would inform us if they felt that any of the survey results were distorted or not. So we do have confidence in the information that's being provided. With regard to your second point around cycle infrastructure, of course we do have a strategy. The panel will be aware of the aspirations for cycling that the borough has, that's set out in our walking, cycling and sustainable transport strategy. But I think that the recommendation is simply to review the strategy as it stands at the moment in the light of current events. I hope that clarifies the points. Thank you.
So we're still on the questions bit rather than comments. Paul, is this a question or a
it's a comment?
Comment. Okay. Are there any more questions? Tony, you sure? Is that a quick question at all? Oh, you're on mute, Tony.
That's it.
Yeah.
Okay, you hear me? Right.
Yes. Yeah. Fine. All right.
The scheme that has concerned me is Sheepcote Road. The buses have to share the outside lane with all traffic. Will the officers please consider making the inside lane a bus lane which cyclists can use? Thank you.
Right, okay. David, can you say yes to that? Or no?
All I would say is that if the panel are minded to consider alternative arrangements, then that is a perfectly valid suggestion, because obviously Sheepcote Road has a lot of bus routes running along it, but I think that's very much needs to be considered in the context of all the information that's available in the report.
Okay. Right. Thank you. Thank you, David. Thank Tony. Right, we're still on questions. Anjana, is that a question?
Yeah, my question again is regarding the funding. Removing this scheme, it's going to cost another £50,000 to remove this scheme. So the question again is that did council not have a contingency plan to actually put in place to remove it, or did they think that this will just go ahead you know, and kind of temporary is going to become permanent and nobody is going to, you know, blink. Is that what they thought? So I really am worried now that this is going to be in total £75,000, which is going to be taken away from the highways maintenance, which could be used for so many roads that needs doing. So my question is, why didn't council have a contingency plan to actually remove this scheme?
Well, thanks, Angela. It's probably the same answer as before, but David.
Thank you for the question, and the answer is the same. When we were planning these things, you have to go back to the situation that we were in. We were in a situation where all funding from our normal sources, and with transport we rely on external funding only at this point in time, were cut off from us, and the situation under the pandemic had completely changed. So we were being asked, as one of the panel members explained, was by the Secretary of State under network management powers to take forward schemes, and we were bidding for projects from government, and those bids did not make allowance for any fees in terms of removals. So given that situation, with the best intentions in terms of putting in transport schemes that would support travel under the pandemic, we made those bids and we committed to putting in those schemes. In terms of contingency planning, obviously we are aware that we were heading towards this meeting and the likely recommendations that were coming, and so we are making contingencies within our budgets to address these things. But that is really, that's the only thing that we've been able to do. We couldn't get that funding from external sources to remove the schemes, as I've explained previously. Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Can I come back again, please, Chair? I mean, what lessons has been learned from this? Do you always have to jump to whatever money is offered? And I mean, I know panel member may have mentioned whatever, but let's be frank with each other. This funding was not forced upon us at all. Harrow decided to bid for it. So I will also go on and on about it, but David has actually responded to my question. So what lessons has been learned from this? Do we really have to go for everything what is offered, or do we really should think about it in future? So what lessons has been learned is what I would really like to know, and that the road, highways and maintenance is going to be nearly £75,000 worst off, so I'm really worried about all those roads that really need maintenance.
Well, it was statutory guidance from the government, but anyway, David, can you respond any further at all?
I mean, I would simply say that pandemics don't happen every year. It's the first one probably in our lifetime, so it's an unusual situation and an unusual circumstance. So, I mean, I'm sure that we'll all draw conclusions and lessons from it. But going into a pandemic and never experienced one before, I don't think we just did the best we could at the time. That's all I can say.
Okay, right, thank you. Right, Pamana, is that a quick question?
Yes, I have a question. Thank you, Chair. It's just following up from what Councillor Patel has asked in regards to the cost of removing this scheme, the cycle scheme. Could we have a breakdown of why it costs £70,000 to remove it? Just because in the last one with the planters, with the LTNs, it was 25. So I'm a bit confused as how this is more expensive than that one, and because I just see them as a few cones, sorry, and stuff on the road. So it'd just be good to understand why it costs 70k. Can we have a breakdown? Is that possible or not?
Do you have that to hand, David, or can you?
I can explain it.
Okay.
Yes, Councillor Asada, you're quite right. It's more expensive to remove the cycle schemes. With the cycle, I mean, moving the cones is simple. That doesn't cost very much money. Okay, I agree. Burning off road markings and laying replacement road markings is the bulk of the cost. And then you also have to remove the traffic signs similar to the way in which you do with the low traffic neighbourhoods. So it's the signing and the road markings costs that are the most expensive. Obviously, when we did the scheme originally, we looked at various options to try and minimise costs. One of the other ways that it could have been done is to have these sorts of bollards put in the road, but actually would have cost a lot more to put those in and then remove them than the road markings. So we opted for the road markings. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Right, I can't see any more questions, so we can move on to comments now. Paul, I think.
Thanks, Jay.
Another 3 minutes.
Thank you. Not to use that whole 3 minutes. I mean, just to say, I think, colleagues have raised, and I think it's important, if we ever do use these experimental traffic orders ever again, or if we ever have trial schemes, that it's important we build into the budget for these things the ability to have some money to either make changes or to remove them at the end of the trial if it doesn't work out. Because I do think it makes people more cynical if they don't see money in the budget in case people don't want it to continue at the end of the trial. And I just think that's an important thing. Just on the bus lane, I don't have a really strong opinion, but would really hope that we don't do that without consulting, and we just take the cycle lane away. And then if we then decide that the bus lane is necessary, then that's a different conversation to have. But again, I would stress engaging with local people and obviously the bus companies will be vital in doing that. But I really wanted to talk about the overall strategy, because what this has shown to me, and I've been quite prominent in national newspapers over the past few months trying to get this issue raised, is we have this theory that if we build these cycle lanes all over Harrow, that suddenly something magic will happen and people will decide that suddenly today is the day that they're going to take up cycling. And I'm less and less convinced that that's the case. We see existing schemes across the borough that are barely used, North Harrow being an example, but there are others where cyclists either go on the road rather than the cycle lane that we've put in place for them, or on the pavement. And these schemes where they, on our own figures, they were barely used, but on other figures that the Sunday Telegraph did, they were used even less than that. And I just think we need to try and look at what journeys people are actually making when it's an outer London borough. Are people genuinely trying to follow the tube lines in the way that our strategy currently suggests? Or are they trying to get from the house to the tube station or the overground station so they can then get the train to work in central London when we're back in the post-COVID times and able to do that? And if people are doing those kind of journeys, then actually what we need is better facilities at those stations so people can securely park their bike and leave their bike whilst they're at work and then come back in the evening and then cycle back home if that's what the journey is. If they're journeying to our parks, do we have facilities at the parks and cycle tracks at the parks that people are able to enjoy? And I just think that kind of conversation and just understanding why we have such a low uptake of cycling in Harrow is really important before we keep spending more and more and more money putting in these cycle lanes. And I also just think some of them actually directly extending them or fixing some of the gaps that are in the existing ones would be better than trying to add a brand new one that also has gaps and problems with. So it's just how we look at it and how we do it, because I think all of us understand that more cycling is really important. All of us understand that trying to reduce car use is important. All of us believe that healthy lifestyles and active lifestyles are important, but what we're doing isn't working. And I think this is the best example of it, and certainly most high profile example of it, but it's not alone in our cycle lanes across Harrow. And I think, this should be a wake up call to us to just take a step back and understand what we can really do to encourage people to cycle.
Thanks very much, Paul. Right, so I've now got Amit Palmena, David Perry and Anoop Shah. I'm still aiming to finish by 9:30, but I'll keep my fingers crossed. Amit, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to follow on from what Councillor Osborne said, that everyone on this panel is supportive of cycling, but I just wanted to touch on a point that keeps coming up, which is blaming the government. And I wanted to, as Councillor Marika said before, that this has come from the top, which we all agree. And I wanted to touch on what Councillor Assad said, that the intentions were good, which is to promote cycling and walking, which again we agree. But the issue with these schemes is when there are hundreds and thousands of residents on your doorstep complaining about cycle lane schemes that they don't want, they don't like, we as elected local councillors should have sort of done something about this before, and it's nothing to do with government, because it's the local authority who has the first say and the final say, as we're doing tonight. So yeah, it might have come from government, but we have the final say. And as Councillor Osborne said, these schemes are not great because they're not safe. They're not as connected as they should be, and I think that was evident because there's how underused they were, and the numbers were actually shocking. That in some days there were literally hardly anyone using the cycle lanes. So let's use this as an opportunity to build a better cycling programme for the borough.
Right, okay, great. So thank you, mate. Pomona, you're next. I think John wants to speak as well.
Thank you, Chair. It's very interesting hearing these comments because Councillor Osborne said, whether there's some magic tree that idea that comes into people's minds about getting out on their bikes and cycling. Actually, I was actually thinking of starting to cycle after seeing the Uxbridge Road cycle lanes. But unfortunately now they're being taken away, so I wouldn't feel safe getting out on my bike on the road. So there are people out there who would be encouraged. I take myself as an example. So I just wanted to make that comment. But just to say, this removing these schemes, I think I accept the comments that Councillor Osborne made in terms of making sure that we have a place where people can actually place their bikes if they're cycling to and from work or to stations. It's one of the things that we're trying to do in South Harrow, for example, with our new proposed scheme, public realms consultation that's out there. We're proposing to have some of these bicycle sheds on North Holt Road, for example. So there are things that the council can do and is currently doing to try and encourage that. But safe cycling is our safest bet to try and encourage people. And removing this, I understand, Councillor Jovier said thousands of residents. I don't know. I mean, I live in the area and I haven't heard anyone complaining about it. I've actually seen people using it, but there's difference of opinion. But we have to accept democracy. This is a democratic way of consulting on these issues. And so we've heard from the residents, and they say they want to remove the schemes. So that's what we should consider. Thank you.
Thanks, Ramona. Right. Oh, now I've got David, then Anu, then John, then John. I think they're the 4 people who still want to speak. So, David, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. Let me start by, again, like I did before, talking about the report. Again, it's very detailed. There's huge amounts of data within it. It's articulately captured in order to put across to councillors and to the residents as to what the findings have been following the deliberate temporary scheme. And I, to start, acknowledge and support the recommendations. The consultation results are clear, and I think we need to be demonstrating yet again that we are listening. I keep hearing, I don't want to be political and try not to be, but I keep hearing from Conservative members on this group putting Labour members back in their place of being political, but then they come to this forum quite deliberately to articulate that the council are not doing anything other than these cycle lanes to promote cycling. So they're either being deliberately political or they just don't read their papers and are not informed. So I'm going to take my few minutes to just inform councillors who have sat on this panel for a while to say what is going on and what is the strategy. Councillor Osborne wishes to inherit the leadership of this council in a year's time, but it's not just this attempt on cycle lanes which have not proved popular. He referenced particularly the other schemes which have been implemented, the Jubilee routes and the Northern Cycle routes, again, which has been investment over the last few years. There's been an Elm Grove cycle route Councillor Assad has already mentioned from the High Street Fund the huge investment, £3.4 million, which the council and the officers, who often take criticism, have applied for and been successful at, into improving local high streets. So people don't just do that cross-borough journey, they do their local journeys, South Harrow, Rayners Lane, North Harrow, Edgware. Again, it's encouraging, the strategy is to encourage people to do shorter journeys. There's a cycleway proposed in Kenton to Harrow Weald. Again, this has been overlooked by Conservative members. There's bus priority schemes, which again the council have pushed for, which TARSAP have debated in Wealdstone. When you get bus priority, you get cyclists, as Tony Wood has mentioned earlier. Again, that was 2.4 million. And also there's other things that are going on with the Goodwill to Wall Junction to make the best money of the Section 106 monies to improve the junction. So where you get these huge improvements, there's multi different ways of trying to increase and improve the cycle offer. So when I sit here, and I didn't mean to be talking about this, I've completely changed what I was going to say, just sitting here listening to Conservative members, the strategy is very clear. And there's millions and millions of pounds which go into improving the network, and of which the Labour administration have bid for in order to implement. So there is a strategy, but just not this. And my comment to finish, Chair, is the same as it was before. The cycle agenda is not going away. It's something we all agree on. We want safer cycling, but just not this scheme in this way, and not the approach which has been taken. And I would like to re-hashtag, although I'm not on Twitter, but I understand you hashtag things, is the same recommendation as I mentioned earlier. It's important that there's a lot of people that do support these cycle schemes, and the council in this panel needs to recommend to the cabinet of ways of trying to find additional funding to cater to their aspirations, but not the current ones which are in the report. So again, I will copy and paste this into the report, the chat on the group, Chair, but just for Democratic Services colleagues' purposes, the additional amendment will be exactly as is worded, that the panel recommends a corporate director of community, following consultation with the portfolio holder for environment and cabinet, to review the council capital programme in order to ring fence dedicated additional funding to promote relevant walking, cycling and road safety measures and schemes, because I think it's incumbent upon them, as spending all of our money, that we try and cater to safer cycling across the borough in multi forms. Thank you.
Right. Thanks, David. James, are you seconding the recommendation? James?
Yeah, I'm seconding it. I couldn't put it any better than Councillor David Perry. The council has been doing some very good schemes, and we've got a brilliant strategy for the future. We've learnt some lessons, obviously, from the last round of cycle lanes, which unfortunately we're going to have to remove. But cycle lanes aren't going, a healthier lifestyle's not going. We've got that firmly in the agenda, and I support everything that Councillor David Perry has said, and I look forward to the future. But as I said, we will learn from what's happened, and we will do things better.
Right, thanks, James. I've got Anu, then and Joanna, then John, I think. Yeah, Anu, you're next, I think.
Okay, thank you. So I'm greatly disappointed that the committee is thinking of spending money to remove cycle lanes which objectively don't impact on motor traffic, because they are 2 lanes on a road which is mostly 1 lane, where they do objectively improve the safety for people cycling by providing the separation from traffic that's required by design standards. But then to think of providing, well, if there's a thought of providing safe cycling routes in the future, then these lanes will have to be reinstated. So that's another expense. And there's not been any formal assessment of whether people are in favour of having cycle lanes, because the assumption is that they are, because that's what all the surveys have shown. And it's well known that I mean, the commonplace feedback is unsolicited feedback. It's well, people choose whether or not they want to feed back to that website, and most feedback would come from people who've probably driving past the lanes and have seen them and have been annoyed by them, whereas the majority of people in the population are supportive of more cycling. So I would strongly urge that the lanes are kept in place for the time being, and that the strategy is developed, and then see how those lanes fit with a strategy, and carry out a survey if you want to find out what people actually think about having cycle lanes.
Okay, right. Thank you very much. And I've got Anjana and John. Paul, I think you've had your 3 minutes. Do you want some more time?
No.
Right,
Just wanted very briefly to make a comment on David Perry's amendment.
All right. Okay, I'll come back to you at the end then. Anjana first, please.
Yeah. Thank you. It was good to hear about all this strategy. I live in North Harrow, so obviously I'm speaking from experience because I go out there and walk Rayners Lane and North Harrow and all that area. There has been cycle lanes there for many years now, and I hardly see anyone cycling, and I have been out there at any time of the day and I have not seen a single cyclist cycling on those lanes. So obviously I am not against cycling, as I said before, but how you introduce and where you introduce is very important. So obviously the strategy that you have for many years is not working. So can you look at it more seriously now and make sure that you find some strategy which is more workable, because this is not working, is all I have to say. Nobody is actually being political here, because we all want healthy living for our residents. And as I said, these cycle lanes are there, and I know that people have actually been complaining. Whenever I'm walking down there, people have complained to me, look at this, what a waste. And I don't say anything, I just walk away, because some of the people know that I'm a local councillor. So they talk to me, and some of the businesses also talk to me and say these cycle lanes are empty. So obviously the strategy that you've got for many years is not working, is all I would like to say. Okay. But we are not against this at all. As our councillor mentioned, it has to be properly done so that it is used. Okay. And I'm not a cyclist, but I support cyclists.
Well, thanks, John. John, did you want to come in?
Yes, thank you very much. Fortunately, most of what I wanted to say has already been said, so I'll be well within the 3 minutes. But I just wanted to say that we are basically not anti-cyclists. I mean, cycling is wonderful, but cycling in Harrow is not like going for a spin around a country park and enjoying the air. You want to go somewhere, and the reason why these 3 cycle lanes need to be removed is that they don't do anything. Why would somebody use it unless you're a hardened cyclist? So there is a borough not too far from here, Walthamstow, and many of our officers have been talking about the advantages of what they've done. They have spent an absolute fortune on what they call Mini Holland. And apart from some very good cycle lanes, which do go somewhere, rather than many of the schemes that we have, which just stop. They've actually spent a lot of money promoting cycling. And I just would like to suggest that this is something that we should consider doing. I actually support what Councillor Perry said, which was actually in the Conservative shadow budget, that we need to increase our infrastructure spend. And perhaps some of that could be used to actively promote cycling in Harrow. Thank you.
Right, thanks, John. Paul, you had a comment. Amit, did you have a slight amendment to David's motion?
Yeah, I've just posted it on the group. Just if we can include cycling funding for cycling facilities as well, because it all comes hand in hand. And if there aren't enough facilities available, we're not going to really promote cycling. So I hope that's agreeable with everyone.
David, is that okay with you?
Yeah, I think that's pretty reasonable. As I say, we're not making any specific demands on levels of funding, but to have that wording in there seems sensible.
Right. Okay. Right. Paul, was that your?
That was the point I want to make. I just think it's really important, as well as looking at additional schemes, that we look at where we have schemes, trying to get those schemes better used, and that's predominantly by providing facilities rather than trying to necessarily add to the amount of built work being done.
Right, great, thank you. Okay, so I don't see any more hands, so if we can move to the recommendations. So we've got the original recommendations with David amendment, which has been changed slightly, but I think it has all party support. So can we agree those recommendations, please? Yeah.
Agreed.
Right. Thank you.
Agreed.
Oh, blimey. Right, we're on the last item, which is called streets. Again, we got Paul wants to spend 3 minutes talking about this on comments. Right, so if we go again with the officer's brief introduction, is it David again or Barry? Or
yes, Chair, I shall present the report. Again, I'll be brief because the context behind the scheme is similar to previous ones. We proposed 4 school streets as part of the TfL's London Streets Based programme. We selected schools where we knew that there were particular problems with school drop-off and pick-up, and where we thought that schools were supportive of that type of initiative. We went through the consultation process and TASAF agreed that these schemes could be subject to a trial in August, and we implemented them end of September, beginning of October. So they've had a 6-month trial. They've been subject to the monthly review process, and there's been lots of monitoring and consultation with key stakeholders, including the schools. It's quite clear that they have achieved the objective of creating low traffic conditions for students and parents going to school. It is healthier and it's been safer for them in the confines of the school streets. The schools as well have been very, very supportive of the schemes. We did seek feedback from them at the end of the trial, and they said that it was very effective at improving conditions for the students, which are their primary concern, and obviously an important group of people within the community to consider, both in terms of air quality, safety, and all the current issues that we're trying to address with these schemes. So the recommendations that this report are making is that the panel recommends to Cabinet that the trials are extended until month 12 of the 18 months, so a further 6 months, and that a full report be brought back to TASAF on the progress of the trials, so that the future of the schemes can be considered.
Thank you. Thanks very much, David. Right, are there any questions, first of all, on the school streets scheme? Nope. Okay. If there isn't, if we move on to comments, then I've got Paul, I think, first of all.
Well, thanks, Chair. Just first of all, just to point out that paragraph 2.21, I'm not sure it is in reflection of the recommendation. That says to recommend they extended to 18 months, whereas the actual recommendation is just to month 12. And I just think it's important that we just clarify that, certainly from our point of view, we're relaxed about them being extended to enable them to work properly without schools being closed, but not necessarily for the full 18 months. On the specifics, I just think, and I think my colleagues might put forward an amendment to this effect, that whilst it's important we get the data from these schemes, I'm nervous about moving forward and implementing other schemes until we understand why there is such negative comments on these. And these are the schemes that I'm actually most disappointed about in terms of the reaction. They're the ones that I thought would get public acceptance and would deal with the problems in a way that I thought would be a sensible approach that we could use across the borough. But the consultation feedback is broadly negative on these, which is disappointing, and I think we need to understand why. And I also think we need to understand the effect that these schemes have knock on roads. I'm very nervous. There's a scheme that is in the pipeline for Pinner, and it might be a wonderful scheme that reduces driving and encourages people to walk, but it might just push the problem from one road to another road and create a problem where there isn't one, and help people. And just that data from the schemes we've got over a period when the schools aren't being disrupted due to COVID is a really important evidence base that I think is really necessary before we implement any new scheme. That doesn't stop us doing some consultation work and taking some of these things forward, but I'd just be very wary of implementing anything until we understand both the things that work well in these schemes and the things that don't, and the tweaks we might need to do in terms of delivery times, or all of those other issues that have been raised. And I just really ask the panel to continue for these for 6 months to get proper data, and just put a pause on the implementation of any new scheme until we have that data. Thank you.
Right. Okay. Right. So I've got Amit, David, James, and John as well. Right. Amit, you're next.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow on from what Councillor Osborne said, and this scheme, we do need time to see how it goes, and we know it's been difficult because we've not been able to enforce anyone and schools haven't been operating, and we thought we'd propose an amendment that no further school schemes are implemented until we can see and have the data from how the current schemes are operating. And I was just typing an amendment on the group chat, which I'll paste in.
All right, great. So you're saying that you're okay with continuing the current ones for a further 6 months, but after that you should pause on any other ones until we see the data from the current school street. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
Jonathan. Right. Okay. Right. And you put forward an amendment, have you, to that?
Yeah, I think it's on.
Yeah. Right. Well, I'm sure it says. All right. Okay. Right. Can I have David now, please?
Thank you, Chair. To talk to the report in support of the recommendations, one of the school streets is actually within Marlborough Ward, and was similarly to as indicated by Councillor Osborne, was surprised at the level of opposition and criticism. So I believe it'd be cross-party that we want to see the continuation, given the delays and the disruption schools have had, to give this another shot. It is very popular with schools, head teachers, parents, but in order to maybe get into a bit of cross-party bartering, I wanted to put in a recommendation, an additional one, which very much ticks a lot of what has been said already with regards not to future ones, but to ones which we've already had. And I will post that in the group, and it may give members a few minutes to digest both, whether or not we could find a form of words. But I think it's important. For example, in some of them, I don't think the report goes far enough with regards to understanding why we've had so much negativity, and I would like to see an action plan by officers in order to try to counteract some of these problems, that if we do go forward for another 6 months, we're not just going to have the same problems said yet again. And so in some of these areas where we have current school streets, we can try to mitigate and turn some of those hearts and minds that currently see the scheme as a negative into a positive. So I did have a prepared form of words, which I will post into the group, and I will do that, and I'll read it out just for benefit. And I haven't had a chance to see Councillor Joggier's proposed amendment, but I will do once other members are speaking in order to possibly give a view. But it's that the panel recommend to the Corporate Director of Community, following consultation with the portfolio holder for environment, to collate an action plan on learning from the negative consultation feedback to date and take relevant steps to directly address the main issues and problems associated with the school street programme in the local surrounding areas. And I think the main issue is displaced parking, isn't it? I think mostly And so I'll post that in the group now, and then we'll allow other members to come in, Chair.
Thanks very much, David. James, I think your screen's gone.
Yeah.
You there?
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Right. Are you going to second that recommendation?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on what Councillor David Perry, said. You know, I think it's important that we have some monitoring, and especially on the parking side, and that we're quick to try and make changes to make the scheme a success. We all want to see this as a success. The schools are highly supportive, and anything we can do to make that happen, we should do, and do it quickly, not just wait a while. If we get a good idea, let's implement it. Also, I've forgotten what I was going to say. There's another point. Can I come back if I remember what it is?
We can come back to you, James. Sorry. That's fine. Okay. So I've got Anu, Joanna, and John. Anu, please.
Yeah, thank you. They're very supportive of the school streets, and I think they illustrate this issue about public support and what you find in different ways of gathering feedback, where the commonplace feedback is mostly negative. But if you go out and ask people, or if you ask the school, then it's very positive feedback. And I think this needs to be taken into account in future consultations, that in order to get an unbiased opinion, it's really important to go out and ask people to actually do a survey and take a representative sample, rather than relying solely on what people submit.
Thanks very much. I've got Anjana, then John, then I'll go back to James after that. And Anjana.
Thank you, Chair. This is something that I was surprised as well, because we've got school in our ward, and to see this was quite surprising. So I would like to say that and obviously all the schemes that are implemented in those 4 schools, we haven't actually had a very good data from it. So I would actually suggest, and we would want to recommend this to the cabinet, but and I agree with Councillor Perry's amendment, but I would like to the end of your amendment to pause the other schools to be going forward for this scheme, because let's learn about whatever we have got these 4 schools, and let's get that right, and then we can actually go and implement more schools for this program, is what I would like to suggest, please.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anjana. John.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to talk about pausing any other programs until we have learnt about these 4, because we haven't really had a chance to learn since the schools have been closed, I think, until was it March the 12th or whenever it was, which is quite recent. And the other issue is enforcement. Many of you will have received an email from Ian Slaney. I think it was about the 20th of March. For those members who don't know, Ian Slaney is the person responsible for parking enforcement. And he said, we can't cope. We haven't got enough people. Please don't approach us for for specific issues. We're doing our best. So if we already have a problem with enforcing the controls for the 4 schools, what chance is there for the others? And enforcement is the key, because there's so much displaced parking. I know a little bit about the Grimsdyke Road scheme, the Grimsdyke School scheme, and people are complaining bitterly about displaced parking in the surrounding roads. The other issue that they're complaining about, of course, is they can't get their Tesco delivery, their plumber, and their gardener to come during the times when the cameras are working. Well, I think that people are going to have to live with that. And in Pinnow, there is a no parking control between 11 and 12, and you just work around it. It's straightforward. Everybody knows. So please pause this until we've got more data.
Okay, thank you, John. Right,
Thank you very much.
can I go to James? I was going to bring you in, David. Can I go to James first, please? And then...
Yeah, my quick point is it would be good to have, and I think it should have, all councillors in any wards where the schemes are or being proposed to be put are consulted, and any changes which do occur, that they are also consulted on those changes, so there's clear line of communication between the officers and ward councillors. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, James. David, I think we've already started to consult about other schools, and there's due to be a TARSAT meeting, a special meeting in June. Have you got any more information on that at all, please? David.
Thank you, Chair.
Right.
Yeah, sorry, the system's a bit slow. Sorry about that. Yes, the second phase of the School Streets programme is currently under public engagement at the moment, and there's a plan to have a special meeting of TARSAP early in June to consider the outcome of those engagements, and for the panel to consider how to take those schemes forward. For the benefit of the panel, I would make one comment. The funding that's being provided by Transport for London was intended for last year. We've had to carry it forward because the monies were awarded extremely late. In fact, the TfL have allowed boroughs to carry the money forward, but we're only able to utilise it in a very, very short window of time. So if the panel was minded to wait, we would probably lose that funding and have to fund it in a different way. So you need to give that consideration when you're considering the recommendations. So thank you, Chair.
Use it or lose money, I think. Yeah, okay, thanks for that. David, maybe we can try and find a way forward on this.
That was going to be my question, having digested Councillor Joggier's amendment with regards to the funding implications. Now, my own personal view is we have sat here as members of TARSAT, have sat on council. I've even dialed into cabinet a few times to listen in, and the Conservative members are always calling for and have been critical that we didn't consult before implementing schemes. And so we've already talked about learning the lessons. And so the fact that the council is consulting before implementing any schemes, the additional ones we're talking about of school streets, to me seems the right way round. The Conservative members have asked for that continuously, and then at the 12th hour we're asking them now to pause. I don't feel confident about what the word data means. It's a very articulate report. Every area is different, and I would be not obliged to support the amendment by Councillor Joggier just on the basis we would lose funding, and the council administration appear to be embarking on a process that they've called for all along. They haven't said that they're against some of these schemes which promote cycling, walking, etc. But because it happens in their areas, they want it paused. We're consulting as they've asked. We're doing so I wouldn't be minded to support the amendment.
Thanks, David. I think we'll all agree that the current schemes continue for 6 months. So we agree on that. Yes. Okay. Right. So I think we may have to have a vote on the other amendment by Amy. Paul, do you want to come back at all?
I mean, just to be clear, it'd be good to understand exactly what the carry forward is, because this financial year has just started. So presumably we should have until the end of the financial year to implement the schemes, and if not, maybe they can have a conversation with TfL. I just think we would like to support these schemes, really would, and we didn't object to these schemes when they went in the first place. We did object to the cycle schemes, and we did object to the low traffic neighbourhoods, but we didn't object to the school street schemes, and I would like to keep that going and not make it a party thing. I'm just nervous that we are still trying to learn what's going on in the 4 schemes we have. We still haven't issued a single ticket on any of these schemes, and to put more in now runs the risk of us just having to fund removal of them later on if it turns out that we haven't convinced people that they were the right thing to do. And by the way, I'm not saying to pause the consultation, I'm just saying it's the implementation bit in case we may need to make tweaks in the implementation in order to get the thing going. So the wording is very carefully written in that thing. I understand there's consultation going on. It's merely when we implement the scheme so that we can make any tweaks before we spend the money. That's the real worry that I have.
Thanks, Paul. Okay, I've got David again, and then I think we need to decide how we go forward on this.
That was the method in the madness of the amendment, is to get in writing, agreed by the panel, an action plan of what hasn't worked with the ones we've got. So over the next months, the officers are learning concurrently while we're consulting in order to be more informed and to have more data when we come to that special task app, not wait, delay, and then look for more data. So they're not mutually exclusive. So I think we can move to the vote.
Okay, right. And John, and then I'd like to move to a vote on Amit's amendment. And John.
I don't want to go on and on about it, but Councillor Hinckley actually said it very clearly that already we haven't got anything to go by. So we are not saying that we are against it. And by the way, they are in our areas as well. I mentioned schools in Hedge End and in Belmont Road and all over everywhere. So let's not be political here, because nobody wants to do that. The problem is that all we are saying is let's get even this special task up meeting out and then see what it is like to implement or to carry on with other schools. Why do you want to do that when already, as Councillor Hinckley said, that we cannot cope with it? The council cannot cope with it because there hasn't been a single enforcement tickets or whatever sent to anyone. So I think really need to think hard about it. It's not about who is right and who is wrong. It is about what is right for the residents and learn from the lessons that we have already got. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Joanna. Okay, so I presume we agree with the original recommendations. We agree with David Perry's amendment. So we just now got to vote on Amit's amendment. So we need to vote on Amit's amendment for or against. Andrew.
Hello. Yes, Chair. So.
Right. Right. Do you want to go through the list, please?
Absolutely. So
it's either for or against Amit's amendment.
Absolutely. And so Councillor Miles?
Against.
Councillor Perry?
Against.
Councillor Assad?
Against.
Councillor Lee?
Against.
Councillor Hinckley? Councillor Hinckley?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Patel?
For the amendment.
And Councillor Jogger?
For the amendment.
So
the amendment was lost.
Is lost. Okay, so we go with the original recommendations and David Perry's amendment. Right, so I don't see any more hands. So I think we've agreed that on the cycle lanes. Item 10, I haven't received any other urgent business, but can I just finish with two things I'd like to say. The next scheduled meeting is Wednesday, the 14th of July at 6:30, although I think by the sound of it, we'll be having a special meeting early in June to discuss school streets, amongst other things. As this is the last meeting of the municipal year, can I firstly thank all members and advisors for all their contributions and everything they've put in towards TARSAP over the past year. So thanks very much all members of TARSAP and advisors. Can I also thank the officers firstly who had to deal with all the streets-based programme as well as covering the regular TARSAP issues. So can I thank the officers very much for all the work they put in. and also the officers who arranged and had virtual online meetings. So we've had a number of meetings this year, and they've all been organised well by the officers. I think that's it.
Well,
so thanks very much, everybody, and we actually finished before 9:30.
Thank you, Chair, for chairing the meeting so well.
Thank you. Okay, thanks everybody. Sure. See you all again at council or some meeting fairly soon. Right.
Thank you,
okay.
Bye bye.
Right.
Good night.
Right. Cheers then.
Bye.